Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a classic courtroom lesson from Judge Judy that everyone needs to hear, especially if you've ever bought or sold anything using a written agreement. This case is a masterclass in why the phrase, "get it in writing," is so important, but also shows what happens when you don't write down everything. So, here's the setup. A woman buys a Rottweiler puppy. She's heartbroken because her previous Rottweiler just passed away and her other dog, Duke, is super depressed. She finds an ad on Craigslist and goes to see the puppy. Now, here's where things get messy. The buyer claims that when she first arrived, there was no mention of money. The buyer initially thought about just leaving, but her daughter was in the car, crying her eyes out for the puppy. We've all been there, right? That emotional pull is strong. So, against her better judgment, she decides to go through with it. She makes a deal. She pays a $200 deposit and signs a piece of paper. This paper is a simple, handwritten contract. It says she paid $200 and agrees to pay the remaining balance of $250 by a specific date, November 5th. She signs it, takes the puppy, and goes home. Fast forward a bit. The due date, November 5th, comes and goes. The buyer never pays the remaining $250, so the seller takes her to court to get the money she's owed. And this is where Judge Judy steps in. Specifically, she says the seller was supposed to provide the dogs a KC registration papers and shot records. In her mind, the deal was for the dog and the papers. Since she never got the papers, she feels she shouldn't have to pay the rest of the money. It sounds like a reasonable argument, doesn't it? If someone promises you something as part of a sale and doesn't deliver, you'd feel cheated too. You'd probably think you don't have to pay the full amount. She asks the buyer if she signed it. The buyer hesitates, saying she doesn't really remember signing it. Judge Judy isn't having it. She compares the signature on the contract to the signature on the court documents and confirms, yup, it's hers. Then, she lays it all out. She explains that when an agreement is put into writing, that written document is considered the entire agreement. Everything that was agreed upon is expected to be contained within the four corners of that piece of paper. Judge Judy explains that if there had been no written contract, if it was all just a verbal agreement, then she would listen to all the other claims. She would hear about the promised AKC papers, the vaccination records, the leash, the dog bowl, whatever. In an oral contract case, all that he said, she said, stuff becomes the evidence. But the moment you write it down and sign it, the game changes completely. That written document supersedes any verbal promises made before or during the signing. Lawyers call this the parole evidence rule. It basically prevents parties from using outside evidence, like verbal promises, to contradict or add to a clear written contract. Judge Judy points out the fatal flaw in the buyer's case. She tells her, if getting the AKC papers and vet records was a condition for paying the final $250, it needed to be written on that piece of paper. It would have been so simple to add one more line. Something like, balance of $250 to be paid upon receipt of a KC certification and vaccination records. If that sentence was in the contract, the buyer would have a slam dunk case. The seller wouldn't get her money until she produced the paperwork. But that sentence wasn't there. The contract was brutally simple. It just said, dog for $450, $200 paid, $250 due by November 5th. That's it. Judge Judy calls anything else that was discussed puffing, just sales talk that didn't make it into the final binding agreement. The buyer keeps trying to bring up the text messages and the verbal promises. She insists, she told me she was going to give me the paperwork. And Judge Judy's response is cold, hard, legal logic. I don't care. It's not in the contract. She emphasizes that the four corners of that document represent the entire deal. The buyer's decision to sign a document that didn't include the conditions she wanted was her own mistake. She made a decision based on her daughter's tears, signed a simple payment agreement, and in the eyes of the law, that's the deal she stuck with. So, the verdict? Judgment for the plaintiff. The buyer is ordered to pay the remaining $250. She has to pay for a dog without the papers she thought she was getting. All because she didn't make sure the written contract reflected the full deal. What's the takeaway for all of us? It's a powerful lesson. When you're making a deal, especially one that involves a written contract, read it carefully. Don't assume anything. If someone promises you something, make sure that promise is written into the contract. Your contract is your shield. If a key part of the deal isn't in writing, it's almost as if it doesn't exist in the eyes of the court. Don't rely on verbal promises or text messages when you have a signed document. The document is king. So next time you're signing anything, whether it's for a car, an apartment, or even a puppy from Craigslist, remember this case. Take a moment, read every word, and if something is missing, insist on adding it before you put your signature on that line. It can save you a lot of money and a trip to court. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you found this legal lesson helpful, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into interesting cases. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a contract dispute like this. See you in the next video.